Last night, following multiple 911 calls, Nova Scotia RCMP members responded to a firearms call to a Portapique residence in Colchester County. When police arrived at the scene, members located several casualties inside and outside of the home. They did not, however, locate the suspect. This was a very quickly evolving situation and a chaotic scene. The search for the suspect ended this morning, and I can confirm that he is deceased.
It's with tremendous sadness that I share with you that we have lost Constable Heidi Stevenson, a 23-year veteran of the force who was killed this morning while responding to an active shooter incident.
I want to touch briefly on the unfolding events in Portapique, Nova Scotia. I know we've all been watching this on the news. My hearts go out to everyone affected in what is a terrible situation. I want to thank the police for their hard work and people for cooperating with.
Let's get a policing perspective on this. Steve Marasink is a former RCMP major crimes investigator, and he joins us tonight from Edmonton. So as you heard that news conference from Halifax, Steve, what was your reaction?
Just a tragedy, an unprecedented tragedy, Ian, that's going to be felt across Canada. The numbers that they have indicated that are deceased and the loss of an RCMP member is just tragic. There are no other words than that.
And give us a sense of some of the policing perspectives. Middle of the night, rural Nova Scotia, multiple 911 calls. What was that like, do you think?
Well, I can just imagine when the 911 calls start coming in, the members who are going to be working in a rural location, so they're going to be separated by distance. There's not going to be a lot of resources available because, again, it's a rural location, and they would have all started to head to that location, and they would have arrived individually, perhaps two in a vehicle, but it would have been a presence that would have grown over time. But again, for the first officers on the scene, it would have been chaos.
And then the gunman takes off in an RCMP vehicle, I mean a fake one, but it's made to look like that, wearing an RCMP uniform. What do you make of that?
Well, the first thing for the officers on scene, they're going to have to secure the scene and find out, try to identify a suspect or what happened, to try to make sense of what they're seeing. And then the fact that this individual has put a mock-up of a police car together and part of a uniform suggests to me that there's been a lot of pre-planning, forethought, and consideration. This was not a spur-of-the-moment event. This individual planned what he was going to do and carried it out.
So we hear he had a connection to some of the victims and did not have a connection to other victims. There will be no criminal trial here. The suspect is dead. But Steve, if you were investigating this now, what would you be looking for?
The why. Technically they'll be able to put together the how, they'll be able to put the locations in a timeline. But again, it's going to be the motivation. What caused this individual to do such a drastic, horrendous thing? And why at that time? But obviously with the mock-up of the car, this was not a spur of the moment. He put planning and consideration into this. And you have to wonder, did anybody notice that? Was anybody aware of what he was doing?
Sounds like you're as perplexed as the rest of us as we try to find out more about this. Steve Marasink in Edmonton, always nice talking to you.
Thank you, Ian.
It all started with multiple firearm calls at a Portapique house down this country road.
Several casualties inside and outside of the home. This was a very quickly evolving situation and a chaotic scene.
That was around 11:30 p.m. on Saturday. Minutes later, police ordered people in the Portapique area to lock themselves in their homes. Nearby resident Mike McKay saw the police cars coming and several buildings burning.
You're on edge. It's a small community, and thinking, well, if they do cross the river, I haven't slept.
By morning, police released the shooter's name and picture. Neighbors are shocked to learn it's the normally mild-mannered Gabriel Wortman. Police reported there are several victims. Around 9:45 a.m., CBC learned of another house fire, this time north of Portapique in the community of Wentworth. Police aren't offering any details on that. Shortly after 10 a.m., police warned Wortman is on the move again, making his way in the direction of Halifax. He was spotted in the Brookfield area wearing what appeared to be an RCMP uniform and driving what looked to be a police cruiser, a mock-up. Wortman had no RCMP affiliation. Police described him as armed and dangerous.
The fact that this individual had a uniform and a police car at his disposal certainly speaks to it not being a random act.
Video surfaced on social media appearing to show police cars on fire in the Shubenacadie area. It also appears to show officers approaching the vehicles. Then, just before noon, police warned the public Wortman was now driving a silver Chevy Tracker SUV. Darcy Sack said she saw him.
We did not realize that was him until we saw 4 police cars behind him. He was dressed looking like a police officer himself. He looked he was okay, to be honest. He didn't look like he was in any type of rush. He didn't look like he was worried.
Moments later, police said they had cornered Wortman at an Irving Big Stop in Enfield, 12 hours after and 92 kilometers away from where it seems to have all begun. Tom Murphy, CBC News, Halifax.
This morning, Dave Brown was sheltering in his home, but by the afternoon, his grief brought him outside to display his heart on his sleeve.
When stuff like this happens, we got to rally together as people, loved ones in the community, and just show everybody that, bad things happen, but we're still good people out there, right?
This tiny seaside community holds only about 100 people, a smattering of houses on the northern shore of the Bay of Fundy. But deep in the night, people on this quiet road woke to see things they never expected. An armored police car, officers with guns drawn, racing in every direction. And across the bay, something unsettling.
Pretty large house fires, yes. And some explosions, gas tanks or propane tanks and what have you.
The RCMP have lost one officer. Another is injured. The dead officer is Constable Heidi Stevenson, a 23-year veteran of the force.
2 children have lost their mother, and a husband has lost his wife. Parents have lost their daughter, and countless others lost an incredible friend and colleague.
Details about victims are still emerging, and some are still waiting to find out if their loved ones were caught up in the gunman's rampage.
Words cannot or console the families affected by what has transpired over the last 24 hours.
Back in Portapique, the community is reeling. They aren't even sure who among their neighbors is dead.
If it's the lady who we think it is, I've met her a couple times, and always walking around with a smile on her face every time I seen her, and it's real. It's saddening, very saddening.
People in Portapique are going to have to wait a bit longer for answers. Police said this afternoon they are just at the beginning of a long and complicated investigation. There's also a secondary investigation by the agency that steps in whenever someone is injured or killed during police activity. Shayna Lux, CBC News, Portapique, Nova Scotia.
The RCMP have a suspect in custody following a violent incident in a small community near Truro. The suspect was on the run for several tense hours this morning. And with that, we were just speaking with Shayna Luck, as you saw with Rosemary, but let's bring in Shayna once again. She's in Great Village, and this is close to where this morning's events unfolded. So Shayna, hello to you. Let's go over the events as you have them for those that are just joining us right now across the country, as I said, across multiple platforms. So what do we know at this point?
Hello, Michael. Well, it's been quite a morning, as I was just saying. We know that this happened, it began about 12 hours ago, around 11:30 last night in Portapique, which is shortly up the road from me, probably about a 10-minute drive from where I'm standing in Great Village. And we know from the RCMP that some kind of violent incident happened in Portapique. They are telling us that there were multiple victims. We don't yet know exactly what that means, whether that is 2 people, whether that is more than 2 people. We don't know how many yet. We also don't know anything about the state of the injuries to those people, or indeed we don't know whether those are fatalities. But we do know that when that happened, the hospital in Truro, which is probably about 20 minutes over to the west of here, that hospital went into lockdown right away at 11:30 last night. It stayed in lockdown until at least this morning. And this manhunt, shall I say, began looking for a suspect, a 51-year-old Gabriel Wortman. He is a denturist, and we believe he owns multiple properties in the Portapique area as well as in the city of Halifax and Dartmouth. So we do know that that person, Gabriel Wortman, has been apprehended. That happened probably about, I'd say, an hour ago, maybe a little bit more. The RCMP told us that they were able to apprehend him between here and the city. He apparently had left the Portapique area. There was some discussion that he might have been traveling in a vehicle that looked like an RCMP vehicle. He might have been wearing a uniform that looked like an RCMP uniform. We're a little unclear on exactly where those came from, how he got those. But shortly after the RCMP told us that, apparently he must have switched vehicles, or perhaps the RCMP updated their information in some way, because they later told us that he was sighted in a small silver SUV. So at some point after that, it all was happening very quickly, Michael. The RCMP told us that he was apprehended, and so he's in custody now. We're still waiting for an update from the RCMP this afternoon with exactly how this all unfolded, but that's what we know at the moment.
And of course, we've also been hearing from people who were essentially holed up in their basements all night long, talking about the great fear that they were experiencing throughout the night and into the early morning hours. So listen, Shayna, I know you'll be working the phones right now. You'll be working your contacts there on the ground, so we will speak again. But for now, thank you. That is Shayna Luck reporting from Great Village in Nova Scotia.